everybody. Welcome back to Teens No Cap. I'm your host, Charity Chaffee. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in a lot of New England. And we're here today to talk about teens, high-risk teens, IEPs, parent advocacy, all of the things. And I'm so excited to welcome my guest, Monica.
Hi, I'm Monica Trost from Prepared Parent Advocate. I am a school psychologist, an educational psychologist, and a mom of two children with disabilities. And so, based off of my experiences, I decided to become a parent advocate, help support families in navigating the special education process here in California.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So,
And how old are your babies?
oh, they're young. They're 4 and 2. So they're babies.
Okay.
Well, to me, they're still my babies.
No, always, always. Mine are 5 and 2. So we're in like the same framework. Yes.
Oh, yeah, we're in the
Okay.
thick of it.
Yes, we are. So you're a full-time school psychologist.
Yes.
Okay. And then you do parent advocacy stuff on the side. Can you tell us a little bit about your like side gig and what you
hmm
like to do?
Yes. So what I do is I help families who are just really struggling to figure out how to navigate special education because they don't really make it easy to understand all the different steps. There's a lot of laws involved, and the laws are constantly updating as well. And so when families come in, they're really confused. I really want to help them understand with transparency and clarity. Also, let them know that, there are some things that the school is saying that is absolutely correct and to kind of bridge that communication gap so that their child gets the services they need.
Yes, I love it. Okay. That so you are like full. You are like going from school psychologist to like more parent advocacy after school.
Yes, definitely. It's a lot of juggling and working things through, but I love what I do and I love supporting families. So it's been really, really fun. I like it.
So tell me, so your work with parent advocacy, are we
Mhm.
talking like preschool to like college? Like where is your
Mhm.
kind of like range usually?
So I do preschool to grade 12, and then
Okay.
that's pretty much my niche, my spiel. I really enjoy working with preschool age families and children. I have a lot of experience there as well. And I like working a lot with families that are going through like autism diagnoses, things like that.
Oh, okay. So I'm curious. I actually just recorded a podcast with Tabitha, who is fantastic, and she was someone who does assessments for autism in girls and women, and we talked so much about like kind of the undiagnosed, misdiagnosed like autism in girls. And what's really interesting is that I find myself working with a very big like neurodiverse population, and oftentimes the girls that I'm working with aren't diagnosed until like sophomore or junior year. And so I guess I'm curious for you, when would someone with autism benefit from an IEP if they're, let's say, like in high school?
hmm Really, anytime they're struggling in school and accessing their education. So, in special education, you technically don't need a medical diagnosis of autism or any type of medical diagnosis. The schools do their own evaluations to determine if anything is impacting their education. So, if the child is having a hard time like with peer relationships or they're having a hard time with collaborative um, communication within the classroom setting, or they're just not accessing their reading and their writing because there's a lot of perspective taking that's involved in that, then an evaluation would be appropriate at that point to see if there's anything they can benefit from: extra counseling services, extra academic supports, etc.
Okay. So when would a family, let's say, reach out to someone like you?
Oh gosh, they usually reach out to me when they've already went through a few cycles of interventions with the school. So with the school counselor, or they've had like tons and tons of meetings with teachers, or there's been a lot of disciplinary actions that have been involved in. So if their child's been suspended or they've been receiving they're maybe getting close to expulsion at that point. It's like when they're kind of in panic mode, unfortunately, is usually when they start reaching out to a parent advocate. because they're hearing one thing from one person and hearing something completely different from someone else, and they just need to know what's the truth and how to just support their child.
I see that a lot, and I think that everything feels like it's okay until it's not.
Exactly. And it's great because it's great that this families want to trust the school team, because I think a lot of the people in the field are trying their best to support all students, but there comes to a point where there's just a mismatch in communication of like what is happening and what the best way forward is. And so having an extra voice there that's a little bit removed from the situation to have a clearer picture of what's happening and can actually help navigate that landscape with them is super important.
Yes, for sure. Like I've been part of so many meetings where you can tell that there is like so much conflict and like misunderstanding and like lack of clarity on the teams, and then it becomes this kind of like power struggle, or this kind of like I need to win this, or just like the conversations are not productive or conducive. So I'm wondering if you could talk about like maybe like some steps to take, like if you're a parent in that situation, or if you're a school person in that situation, how do you take steps to kind of like realign and like maybe rebuild trust or like reset the team?
So as a parent, I would just try to slow things down. I'm like, okay, wait, I feel like I'm really confused right now. What do you mean by this? What does that look like exactly? How do you know? And then kind of have the school team kind of detail it out and paint this picture a bit clearer for you so that you can understand what exactly is going on. And then on the school side of things, I really hope that they're really truly listening to the parents, that they're giving more time and attention towards them, because it's more than just school. It's their baby, it's who they're going to be as they grow up and as they go out into the world. It's a very emotional journey. It's more than just reading, writing, and math.
Well, especially when you think about like the middle school, high school years, you have like this entire social dynamic. You have stuff about like work ethic and self esteem. You have confidence components, right? You have like the neurodivergency. Like really, what we're talking about is helping to support long term scaffolding, right? And we want all the kids to be able to graduate and to move on to wherever they're going to with the skills that are going to help them get there, right? And so, like, we think about it in terms of like it's just school or it's school, but it really covers like 80%, 85% of like this child's life, right? Because school takes up so much time. So, like, I can appreciate that. It's a huge deal. And it's like your kid, you want to see them be successful. You want them to like have the experiences that are like important, that help build like all of those guidelines. But it can be really hard to kind of get on the same page, especially if you're a parent who's like new to kind of the advocacy piece, or like this is your first IEP meeting and you're like, I have no idea what to expect. And then the other frame of it too, which you had kind of mentioned earlier, is like when you have a kid who's already been disciplined and they're on the disciplinary path and they're just like behaviors, right? Your child who you have like raised and loved and supported and whatever is now being framed as like it's all your kid's fault, or whatever that might be. Even if the school is trying to be kind about it, that I think is like a lot of the emotional work that parents are doing when their kid like needs an IEP and they're struggling in school.
Exactly. And it feels personal. It's very much a family event as well, because whatever's happening at school, it's most likely coming into their home life as well as they're having conversations and trying to build up these skills with them. And so having the team on board and having really a team of professionals to help support and kind of have that wraparound service is very essential for them, especially as they're moving on and building those advocacy skills and out once they graduate and go out to the world.
Yes, for sure. Do you deal with a lot of like school avoidant kids in like middle school, high school?
Yeah. I feel like that's increased lately too. There's definitely a lot more of school avoidance happening. Um, we've definitely written a lot of behavior intervention plans in place in order to help support them and kind of accessing the school and at least just coming and feeling comfortable enough to come to school, even if they're not doing the work that we would hope that they would do, but just being there so that way they can at least gain something from being in school, whether it's just with their peers or maybe they're listening a little bit on what is being talked about. Yeah. school avoidance is huge in middle and high school.
I think in particular, if I had to guess, right, I have not done research on this, but if I have to guess, I think that the level of anxiety and perfectionism and the level of pressure, and then the other perspective of like, we're inundated all the time with like social media, and like kids really never get any time alone now that they have like phones. And so school is like another rendition of that. And then I think that like there are so many kids with like different neurodivergencies that are not being like supported adequately, and I think there's so much like shutdown there that they're like, I would rather get in trouble for not going to school than go and like suffer whatever I'm suffering if I have to be there.
Yes. Yeah, and I feel for the kids who feel that way. I mean, I feel like also there's a lot more supports and a lot more options available for what environments they can be in to support them, but it's just a matter of finding out what those are so that they can access it instead of feeling like they're stuck into this one school, this one framework only.
Yes, exactly. Well, and that's like I think when I was like looking for a house, everyone's like, "Oh, you have to look at the school district," and it's like, how can you tell, right? At like at birth or like at 3 years old, like what school district is going to be a good fit for your kid. But I think like the more that I've worked with teenagers, the more that I've worked with families, a lot of it is like flexibility of the district and like different levels of like access in terms of like wilderness programs or like half day like the night school that some schools do for like teens who are really struggling to get there. And sometimes I think the more creative a district can be, the more buy-in they're going to get from the community, but I don't know if that's real. That could just be in my head.
Public school, there's only so much that they can offer because it's public school. But I know in high schools around the area, they do have independent study. I know since COVID, there's been a lot more virtual schooling available through the district still happening. And so that's always an option for students who just can't come into the building but can still have at least access to their academics. Kind of looks like homeschooling a little bit, but still tied within the district.
Okay, no, that's fair. You had talked about like when you have a kid with school avoidance, right? Sometimes getting them there, even if they're just like getting little bits of things here and there, it's important and it can be helpful. But I'm curious, like, how do you help guide a family or maybe a teen into making that decision about whether or not school that day, that week is helpful? Like, what's the threshold for that?
That's a good question. It's so hard. I don't think there's like a one answer for that. I think a lot of the time it really depends on how you communicate with the family and the rapport you have with the child and trying to figure out what is motivating them or what is really making it difficult for them that morning or that day. And then just kind of inching your way towards that. Like, okay, I know this is hard right now, but what about this? Can we do this? And then kind of providing those options and choices and allowing them to feel comfortable and have that sense of autonomy over it can be really valuable.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that I always talk about how like teens don't live in a vacuum and we can't treat them like they do, right? Like they have entire ecosystems, right, of people outside of even family. And so when we're talking about the school avoidance piece, I do think there's such a large part of giving them some like choice and autonomy and say and really making sure their voice is being heard with like what actually is like a hard thing for them or what their needs are. And so I have like some districts that are really great that are like, we don't care what time you get here. If you could just get here, right? And then we'll pick up where you're at. We'll do an assessment when you get here. We'll figure out like how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you feel like you can achieve that day. And I have some kids that like they just go and they just like sit all day and they're just like, I'm gonna chill in this room because that is what my nervous system needs. And I'm like regulated enough to at least like be here to have some like minimal social engagement. And like I think that but when we're thinking about like progress, like we have to think about all those little pieces as like that's huge progress potentially for a kid who like usually would be fairly school avoidant.
Right. And it makes me think, like just hearing you talk, as adults, we too don't always feel like we're on all the time either. We go to work and sometimes you're like, this is just not the day, but I'm here and I'm going to at least get something done. And so that's totally fine. We allow ourselves those kind of accommodations. So why wouldn't we do that for our children too?
That is one of my like biggest beefs I think sometimes with the world is that like we expect so much out of teenagers with like almost no autonomy, right? And like That's the thing. Like I will rep like mental health days. I will rep like having a structured approach to the IEPs. Like I know that school is important, but I also think that there are emotions and other pieces that are at play that are also equally as important. And then I think too, like we're setting kids up. Like I think school is this place where we're either going to set kids up to be really engaged and like effective and efficient in their like future role, whatever that might be, even if it's not like a college place, or we're going to set them up to feel trapped by the system and they have to go there, they have to do this, they have to do all these pieces that like maybe they wouldn't actually like want to do.
Right. No, and I think in the realm of IEPs and special education, for high school, what's really great is that there's a law now where they have to be involved in their IEP process once they're in high school. So they do get a little bit more say in the plan and identifying what supports they want, what they feel is actually helpful for them. They get to actually be at the table more.
Yes. Which is so good. I don't know. In Massachusetts and some of the other like New England states, I think the minimum age for involvement is 12. I think at like 12 they start bringing them into like their meetings for like a little bit. What is it in California?
It is 16. So minimum is 16, but usually, most often than not, we try to get students involved earlier than that in some way. So in the middle school, I've definitely asked parents, I'm like, hey, does your child know what they're going through? Do they know they have an IEP? Do they know they're being assessed for an IEP? And what kind of conversations are you having with them? More often than not, parents are like, yeah, we want to have these conversations with them. We just don't know how. And so then it's about talking to the school, trying to figure out how they can support in that conversation and have their child more involved. So even if they're not at the IEP meeting themselves, we can ask them like, what accommodations have been helpful for you? What do you think will actually help you? What do you think your brain is doing at this moment in time? And so I know when we start asking those questions to the students, they feel so much more relieved. They feel more heard, and it actually stops the school avoidance as much too, because they're like, "Oh, I have someone on campus that truly listened to me. I want to go there."
Yes, for sure. So let me ask you this. If you have a kid who I think by all accounts, testing has come back and they're like, oh, this kid would definitely benefit from an IEP, all the adults in that space are like, an IEP would be helpful. But you have a kid who is either really nervous about them or doesn't want one because they don't want to be seen as like different, right? How do you facilitate those conversations with the teen to really like bring them in and be like, hey, this is for you. This is like your plan.
Yeah, I would probably ooh, I would probably have that conversation with the child or the student separately and not in front of all the professionals at the table all at once, and just kind of really dive in like what's your fears around this? Like what is it about the plan that you're scared of or you feel uncomfortable about? And then let's try to find a way so that you can still get the supports you need to be successful and kind of find the hope and the joy in it as well so that you are successful and that you're doing just fine. It's just everyone needs extra supports. It's just now we have a more formalized plan, and you now know there's so many people at the table that are here to support you.
Well, and I don't know how it is in California, but I know in Massachusetts a lot of the conversation sometimes with those folks is kind of this thing of like you would rather have it and not use it than need it and not have it. So like sometimes I find myself having the conversation of like I'd rather you have access to this and never use it because they're not forced to use them the same way that like I think they are maybe in other states. But I would never want them to like need something and then not be able to get it or have it take a really long time to get there. And so I think that is also part of it. And does California force them to use it if it's in their plan?
It's tricky. I think, oh gosh, it's tricky because sometimes people are like, well, why are we giving children all the say? They don't have the rights to have a say. And so like if that's their plan, then you have to do it. And I actually had a conversation recently in a meeting. I'm like, look, they don't want to go to counseling sessions. They don't have to go. I can't force them to go to counseling, but it's available if they need it. The fact that they advocated that and they used their words appropriately to tell me that's how they're feeling, that's great. Because if you force a service too, there's downsides to it as well. Like if you're forcing counseling when they're not ready, they may never want to do counseling sessions ever again, even when they're into adulthood and beyond. And that would do such a disservice to them and their persons in the long run. So meet them with where they're at, maybe start building rapport. Most likely they're not accessing the services because they probably just don't like you as much as you would hope they would, because the rapport and the rapport building wasn't there yet. They don't know you. So until they get to really know you and trust you, they may not want to attend. And that's not a judgment on you, it's just relationship building. It's all relationships.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think too, like some people are very, like some of the teens I've talked to about it are very intimidated by the idea of doing school counseling, because they're like, am I just talking about school? Am I talking about home stuff? Like, what is it like having this person at school know about something I'm struggling with at home? And so it feels like there's a lot of like, not even boundary issues, but kind of just questions about the content. And I think too, to your point, when you're talking about like this entire team of people that's like here to support this person, it's so important to kind of have those one-on-one conversations with the teen so that like you have individual rapport with the person that you're advocating for, with the person that you're like providing counseling for, with the person that you're like, sitting in the meeting with. Because I know sometimes like people have like very short lengths of time where they have to meet a kid, but then the kid never sees them again. And it's like, you know what I mean? Like they're kind of there and then they're gone. And so I think it could be so good if we're talking about how to engage a team and how to engage a teenager into this, like really extending it and being like, hey, I just wanted to say hi and like check in and see how you're doing. And, having those little opportunities to be like, I'm here if you need me as a reminder.
Totally agree. And then part of the rapport building I typically do with students is I'm like, I'd never want to put words in your mouth. And at least in the realm of special education, our counseling sessions are always related to their goals that's written up. And I always ask them, like, do you think this is a good goal? Is this something you want to work on? And then while we're working on it, I'm like, can I share this with others? How do you want me to phrase it when I do share it with others? Do you want to write this email along with me so we're all on the same page of what's being shared? And so getting that involvement with them, building that trust, just verbalizing every step of the process with them, I think really helps alleviate some of that anxiety. Um, which is also what I do with parent advocacy support services too, right? With parents, because they're probably feeling the same way when you bring someone else into the team who you don't know, but you're having all of these confusion and like just difficulties navigating it. You just need to know step by step what's happening and have that transparency and your input valued as well.
For sure. And I think that's the thing. Like I think it's so cool what you're doing because I feel like the parent advocacy piece is like such an important part to really like empower parents to like be a part of that and to be an active participant and to know that like they know their kid the best, right? And that like they're there advocating because we all want the best for them. And I think too, going back, like you had said, like part of your thing is just to like slow down, right? Like, and I do think that when you're in a school system, right? And I've been part of the meetings before where everyone's like, yep, this, and this, signed, sealed, delivered, done with a half an hour. And a lot of people are part of the team are like, okay, cool, we're on it. But then you catch the parents and you're like, wait a minute, right? Like, are they actually on this? Do they understand the lingo? Like, they're not part of this every day, right? Like, they sometimes didn't have the chance to ask these questions or to like really critically think about it. And so I think it's so cool just to be able to step back and be like, let's just slow this down, right? Let's ask all of these like nitty gritty questions. And it's not to like, really question the school, but it's to get the perspective, right? And to really see what their experiences are with that kid in class, in the halls, in any situation they're having.
Yeah, well, and it's also just really intimidating to be in a room full of professionals that are saying that this is how it is, and you're still learning everything as you're going. And so to have someone who can talk to you even outside the meeting to kind of say, "Hey, this is what's happening. Where are your questions? How much do you want me to front load you? How much do you want me to slow down?" That's what our students need, and then that's also what our parents need. We always need it. No matter what age we're at, no matter what age or where we are in our life, we always need that moment to kind of have a partner to kind of touch bases with and kind of understand what's happening.
Yeah. Well, it's a good like reality check, right? Because like the school's doing the best they can do, and I think having a parent advocate in there is really making sure that like the parent has the support and the guidance in the same way that the school does with like the school attorneys and like all the special educators and everyone that's there. And like I always want parents to be really empowered in those meetings and to like really know that they can push for things for their kids. Especially because like they're the ones that see them struggle, right? And in different and more vulnerable ways than like we might as professionals or we might as school. And I wouldn't want that to get like, dismissed at a school meeting just because someone's like, oh, that's not important, or it's just going too fast and the parent doesn't have an opportunity to like really sit and think about what was just said.
Right, right. And parents, like you said, parents are so knowledgeable about their child. They just may not necessarily know the special education law to kind of guide that conversation for that in a way that both the school team and parents are understanding each other. It kind of sometimes it feels like there's two different conversations happening at times where the parents are talking one language, the school is talking another, and so it's just a matter of bridging that.
I'm curious because we've talked about some kids that like need IEPs and how to kind of be part of a collaborative team. But I've also had the experiences where I feel like the kid has such an IEP that it almost like cuts the feet out from underneath the school district, and it really takes away their ability to kind of like offer support and do anything that would be like growth promoting. And it's almost like the kid has like too much of an IEP, if that makes sense. And it's like maybe enabling some of the things or, not really pushing them to kind of grow in the direction that they'd want to. So I'm curious if you have thoughts on that. And I apologize if my language is like not aligned because I'm trying to I feel like there's this like question here where it's like, can an IEP at sometimes be enabling for a kid who like doesn't want to grow, or like a family who is afraid of like what happens if my kid fails? So I'm curious, and if that's not a valid question, you just let me know. But
No, no, I think I understand the question. If I'm not answering it, just let me know too. But there is actually on the IEP paperwork itself that says whether or not the risk of an IEP outweighs, or like the benefit of an IEP outweighs the risk. And so there are actually, I feel like teams don't talk about it very often, but it's on there. And you're supposed to talk about like there are risks to being in special education. There's self-esteem risk. They may have the sense of learned helplessness involved in it. Gosh, I'm blanking on the other ones, but there are risks to having a special education plan. But the idea is to like weigh it. And then that's why it becomes really important to have our teens involved in the conversations. Like, look, this is what's happening or what could happen. How can we combat that? How can we help it so that this doesn't happen while you're still getting the supports you need?
okay, thank you, because you had said it, learned helplessness, right?
Learn helplessness.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think like I mean, I'm sorry everyone, I said it as enabling, but I like understand the tone of that. But I do think sometimes like I've seen IEPs that are so extensive, right? So extensive and so like nitty gritty into all these little things that I question like, is this actually helpful anymore? Or is this just like promoting kind of like this homeostasis of like nobody walks on eggshells and like nobody like, catches the fire? And like, when do we stop that and move towards promoting growth and development, even if it's uncomfortable?
Yeah. On the legal side of it, the best way to do it is to collect data. It's like, hey, look, this is where we're at. They seem like things are going well or things aren't going as well. If we pull some things back, let's take the data. Let's see if it actually is helpful. Did we see an increase of the positive behaviors that we're hoping to see? Are we seeing more concerns because we pulled away? Like kind of having that ebb and flow. One of the things about special education paperwork that I think a lot of parents don't know is that it's a working document. So you can always come back to the IEP table. You can always make edits and corrections. You don't have to wait for the annual or for the triennial to have your input heard and for data to be collected and new goals added or goals and services taken away. It really depends on where the child is and meeting them with where they're at.
I'm so glad you said that actually, because I think that there are a lot of parents who don't understand that part of it and like either don't have a therapist working with the teen or don't have access to like the family advocate to really understand that like that is a working document, which means we can edit, we can subtract, we can add things, we can manage it as we want to, right? up until the time that that kid is like literally graduating from high school, right? And that none of these things have to wait. And so if you see your kid like struggling, if you see something that's not working, if you like are having a difficulty, you're like, oh, this shouldn't be here, like this would be more helpful, like reach out to your district and have those meetings. Because as you said, a lot of times they're legally required to respond in a certain period of time. The school district wants to be helpful and supportive, and they need the information from you that, hey, this isn't the most helpful thing it could be.
Right. Exactly. And schools are really wanting to help. I mean, that's the whole point. The people who go into education is because they truly want to help the children. They just get kind of busy and there's a lot of moving pieces and a lot of moving parts. And so I really hope parents don't hesitate to reach out to their case manager or to their teachers, because just giving a little heads up, like, hey, I'm concerned about this, is enough to get things going.
How would a parent assess that for changes? Like if you were a parent and you were or working with a parent at home, they have an initial IEP, it's been a little bit of time. What are we looking for in terms of like growth, development, stability, access, like any of those things? So how would a parent know like, ooh, it's time to change this or approach it differently?
So every IEP goal has a report card, kind of like just with like the academic report card, the ABC. But each goal has its own progress report, and it should be released or given to parents every time the school district report card is handed out. So they're paired together. And on that report card, it should tell you how they're progressing on that goal. And so if it looks like they're not progressing, like you could see that they're having a dip, or they're saying, oh, couldn't meet the baseline, or they're wherever they are with the data, that's when you could reach out like, hey, we already went through one report card period. It looks like he's not making progress. Can we talk about it? What's happening? Is it a behavioral thing? Is it him not understanding what's going on? Just getting better picture of what's happening.
Because I guess I'm kind of curious, like, so I work with a lot of like heading to college kids, right? They're juniors, seniors, they're in the process of like applying and going through that whole process. And a lot of the guidance that I have heard and read and kind of been given too is that like anything IEP you have in place, junior, senior, and high school is really the stuff and the supports that's eligible to move on to college. And so part of it is like I always try, and this could be wrong, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I always encourage like parents to kind of like and the teens I work with to take a look at their IEP junior year and really get a sense of like what is helpful, what are they actively using, what maybe is not super helpful, what they never access, even if their meeting isn't until senior year, because I would want them to be able to trial some of those to make sure that like the IEP is like as good as it's going to get for high school, so that way when they transfer those things to college it kind of carries with it and they have like evidence of like those accommodations and the effectiveness of them. But I'm curious on your thoughts on that because that could be total garbage.
I haven't worked in a college, but I do have colleagues that do college kind of applications and work in the disability centers in colleges. To be honest, it doesn't really matter if a child comes in with a 504 plan or an IEP. Both of them stop after high school. It's nice to have documentation though, and then you could give it to them. And you're right, if you could really fine tune it to like what very specifically has been the most helpful for the child, the college will have an easier time like processing that information and kind of translating it to what is available in the college level. College only really does accommodations. They don't really do services. So if you can kind of really fine tune that accommodations of what's been really helpful for the child, what the services, what they're getting from the services can look like as an accommodation too, like having that kind of laid out for them can be really helpful.
Okay. It's interesting. I've worked with a lot of kids that are transitioning from like high school to college, but it seems like also in terms of colleges, there are colleges that have like student service centers with like vast services for like for a special education thing. And then there's ones that are like, nope, we'll give you accommodations, but that's about it.
I think the services for the colleges really depends on your eligibility too, or like what your disability is, and then what kind of accommodations would be provided. So I mean, I don't know. I guess it depends on the college, like you said. If a child has intellectual disability or they have autism, then there might be some very specific services available at the college, but it really depends.
And this is part of what makes it so confusing, right? Is because like what translates, and I think the logic and like um the rationale probably changes depending on the trajectory, the college, the area, the location, what the high school did. And so it's really like clear as mud, right? When you're a parent and you're like trying to do research and trying to figure out like where to go with all of this and like what's actually important, it makes it feel that much more complicated.
It's even harder because once the child's in college, the parents can't really be involved in it anymore at that point. And so, again, it just goes to show how important it is to involve your child in the IEP process and in their school experience. So they also find a school if college is their path next, they pick a school that really matches who they are and what their strengths are and where they would fit the best. And so just having that conversations and that dialogue and that advocacy building skills in place before they go off to college is really, really important.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think like some of those IEP meetings are like the first example of a kid who's really been able to advocate for themselves. And like, it's a skill like anything else is, right? It can be really scary, it can be really intimidating. But like, when you're part of that team and that team's there to talk about you and to talk about like how to support you, like your voice is imperative, right? Like you have to be a part of that, and then it's really great like advocacy when you can like ask for the things you need, and you can like be like, hey, this doesn't work for me in my IEP anymore, and you can go and like get it changed. Like it's such a workable situation when kids are encouraged to be a part of that and encouraged to share their voice. These were some questions that I had because they're totally in line with like some of the cases that I'm working on. But one of them was talking about kind of like how to help support a team or a family or like a school when a kid is kind of routinely in and out of school for higher levels of care. So if there's like this really big kind of like back and forth, whether that is like a medical setting or like a mental health setting, but I'm kind of curious like how do you navigate that with them in like the most supportive way? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think the case manager becomes one of the most important members in that conversation because they're going to be the consistent person that knows everything that's happening about this child. And so, really getting them involved and understanding who they are, what's happening, and making sure everyone on the team, that information is relayed to the rest of the team so we're all on the same page. I think just that open communication is the most important when things are constantly changing, and so that way, if something happens, we're on the lookout and we're all supporting each other. We're all communicating. We're all telling each other what's happening so that we catch anything. If something's going wrong, we're catching it earlier than later.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I was gonna say because I think like I've definitely had people that have been like in and out of different levels of care and have needed longer stays, different places. They've gone to residential, etc. And I do think it's a lot to manage, and so I give grace to like the parents and to the kid and to the school because it's a lot of collaboration. But I think at the end of the day, in my experience too, like the communication piece is probably like the biggest piece, and then the flexibility in thinking is probably the second, right? Because I feel like if we can all be like really clearly communicating on like lengths of stay and where people are at and work and credits and all of that stuff, we're going to be a lot better. But then I think there's a rigidity still, I think, sometimes in school districts, whether it's like just historical or like it's the team. But I think sometimes we have to be really flexible with like what we're requesting of a teen, or like thinking way outside the box if we have a kid who's kind of in and out of a lot of different levels of care. Because I do think, going back to what we talked about, like education can look different for everybody, but we have to really sit and think about like how is education for this kid.
Right. And I think sometimes schools, because again, this is kind of like a routine thing that they kind of go through, their blinders kind of come on and they kind of narrow in and focus on specific things or like a certain procedure that they tend to follow. When we really want to be flexible, we want to think creatively of like how we're going to support the child and also thinking about least restrictive environment. So what placement would be best to truly support the child? If they're constantly coming in and out because of medical treatment or for whatever reason, like what environment would be the most accessible for them? Would that be a private school? Would that be a non-public school? How is the district going to help fund that? Or where is the district involved in all of that? I think those are the next kind of steps in conversations that the team should probably talk about next.
Yeah, I think that's like the hard part I've seen a lot of is I have, definitely seen the parents who are like, if you don't go to school, you're gonna go to the ER, right? There's like this threat behind like, the school avoidance piece. And so you get these like kids and families sometimes that are so disheartened by the system and so frustrated by what's going on that they're just like, whatever, if you're not going to go to school, you're going to go to the ER and you're going to get screened and you're going to get placed. And it's really hard because I can see the grief and the fear in the parents, and at the same time, similar thing with the kid where like they're feeling hopeless, they're feeling so defeated, they're like, feel like they're not being seen. And then we have this like entire clusterfuck where it's like we don't have to go down that path. We can choose a different path.
Yeah, and it's just a matter of making sure everyone's input is being gathered, everyone's different perspective is being gathered and acknowledged, and trying to figure out the best way forward.
Well, and I do think nowadays too, it's like all about being creative, right? Like how creative can we get? How can we like get this person into like really engage in their academics? How can we be creatively, supporting the family if there is some resistance? I had a family at one point who, many families, throughout my career that refused to get their kid tested by the school, refused to ask for an IEP because they felt like if they did that they were just enabling their child and making it too easy on the student.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen those types of situations too where it's a grieving process too, right? Like if you do have an assessment done and then now it's on paper, all of these deficits, all these struggles, and sometimes that assessment process can be pretty invasive of like what is happening in the family, what is the family background, the education back. It's more than just the child, it's the whole structure of like the community supports that's available being interviewed and being dissected during the process. So I get it. I get how scary this process is, how vulnerable this process can be. Sometimes parents would sign an assessment plan, and in the middle of it they're like, I didn't realize these rating scales were going to ask these types of questions. I don't want it. Like this is too much. And that's, to me, that kind of goes back to the transparency piece. Like we need to be more transparent with families of what this is, what it means, and what supports are available because of it, or what supports are going to be denied because we don't pursue it.
Well, and I think you brought up an important point in terms of grief, right? I think that there are so many parents that want obviously the best for their kid. They think the most of their kid. They think so highly of their child, right? They just want their kid to be super successful. And I think sometimes it's so hard to like see the rating scales, to see the data, to see all these things coming out. And so it is this process of like grieving, like maybe your kid having an easier time, right? Maybe your kid not having as many struggles as like you had. Maybe it's like you thought your kid was going to be, like off and golden, right? Like once they turned 18. And sometimes like all the data you get from that can totally change, right? That, and that it is that grieving process.
Yeah, and as parents, because I know I feel this way as a mama too, if whenever my child struggles, I feel like it's a reflection of me as well. And that's hard to process too, because we're always trying our best to be the best for our children at all times. And we also have to kind of give ourselves that grace that we're only human, we're doing our best, and we are doing the best for our children. Whether we pursue a special education plan or not, we're always thinking for what's best for our children.
Yes. Well, and I was going to say, because I certainly don't mean to shade anything in a negative light, because I absolutely understand that like families are doing the best they can. Parents are like operating the best they can, and I respect that. And I also think that like with testing and with, choosing accommodations or not, we're also amplifying the family voice in it, and like sometimes it really is just something they don't want to do. And so how do we figure out and find other ways to support this family, to support this teen, to build the skills if like that path is not there, right? And so like we may shut down one path, but I think it's important to then assess and look at all the potential other things that are there, and not just like pushing families for continual like assessments if it's something they're really not interested in for whatever reason. And that can obviously be part of the conversation going forward in therapy and beyond. And maybe one day they'll be like, oh, I should have done that, or like, I'm happy with the choice I made for you. Like, either one is okay. But I do think sometimes like we get stuck as providers and we're like, no, you have to get the testing done. Like, this is the best way. But like, that's where I think the creativity piece comes in, where it's like, but there are other ways to do that too. There are other ways to get these needs met. There are other things we can do, to support like that teen, that kid, and that family. That's not just like us forcing potentially our own belief on like everyone should have access to this if they need it.
Right, exactly. And I do think school districts are trying their best to provide more options and more paths. So yes, we have special education, we have IEPs, we have 504 plans, we have tiered systems of supports in place. Some schools call it MTSS, some call it SSTs. I mean, there's so many acronyms that they call it, care teams. Um,
And
but
Massachusetts is
there's,
all different. So all of our
is it
acronyms
really
are
different?
different.
Oh my goodness. So yes. So yeah, which is even more confusing because then parents are Googling things online and they're like, what about this? And like, no, that's not our state. Like that's not how that doesn't that doesn't translate over here. Which has happened before. I've had families coming in and advocating, which is great, but they're like citing a law from a different state. And I'm like, no, that's not how California works. But yeah, there are other paths, and there's wonderful providers outside of the school district too that are finding ways to be creative and providing support for families too. For example, for me, for my advocacy services, I do believe my services can be covered under here in California. We have regional center, which is like I don't know if they have something similar in your state, but it's a it's a state funded program where students with disabilities can get supports. So, usually those with developmental disabilities. And so, those who are in that program, they could get their own funding through self determination plans. And through there, they could potentially use that funding to pay for other services, for therapy services, for advocacy services. And so that allows for more access and accessibility to those that they really need what kind of services they really need.
Yeah, we have a few different programs through like DMH and like other kind of like state level services, but they're not necessarily regional. You still have to like apply for them, but oftentimes there are also things you get through the school districts that are like extra support, especially with like AVA and things like that. So it definitely exists. But it's so funny to me, like thinking about all of the like if you were to have like a an IEP set up in like California and then moved it to Massachusetts, like how many different things are happening, or if you went to like another state, like it's wild how even amongst like the US, all of our services are different and the way that the states have things structured is different. I give so much credit to people that move after they have an IEP because it's like it would be like translating into an entirely different language, but maybe it is easier than that. I don't know. I've never had to do it, but
It can be a little, I mean, there's federal law, so there's at least that kind of tying all of the states together under the special education plan. But yeah, it can be a little tricky and a little confusing. And I think, again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, is just making sure we slow things down and really explaining the difference if we can really, if we know the difference between the two. Um, the paperwork does look really wonky, though, I will say, when those cumulative files come in, we're like, what is this? It takes a little longer to kind of weed through it and then transfer all the information over.
yeah. No, for sure. I'm like imagining like because I know what the Massachusetts IEPs look like, and like they even sometimes differ a little bit based on the school and like the order they do things. To like translate that to like California or like North Dakota or like somewhere else, I'm just like that must be its own like special like process. Anyway, we weren't doing it. It has been like so nice having you on today. Do you want to like tell people a little bit more about your services, where they can find you? I'll link everything below. But are you just doing parent advocacy stuff now, or are you like offering other kind of like IEP review services or anything like that too?
Yeah, so I do parent advocacy services. I do it in a two-step process. So it really kind of ebbs and flows based off of what parents need or are wanting at the moment. So it's really a really in-depth file review, and understanding what their child is and who their child is and what they need, and kind of creating a path forward and helping families understand that. Uh, as well as the second step package is meeting attendants, really holding their hand through the process and making sure that they really understand what's happening. I also have courses that I'm planning to release, kind of diving deeper on certain aspects that I don't think people talk about very often, like the assessment plan, which is very vital to like the whole thing. If the assessment plan is not accurate, then everything just kind of tumbles. So I haven't seen a lot of courses like that out there. So I was thinking about creating one of just on assessment plans. I am an educational psychologist, so I do provide disability evaluations, but it's just not on my website right now. I'm mainly focusing on the advocacy and courses at this time. I also have a newsletter and a podcast that kind of breaks down the IEP process and special education process in very bite-sized chunks, 5 to 10 minutes long, because I know parents are busy and 10 minutes might be all they can afford at the moment, but it's
Yes.
just jam-packed with advocacy tips.
Oh, I love that so much, and I had no idea you were gonna do some courses.
I was thinking about it. I created it and I'm like just trying to figure out how to actually bring it out to the world.
Do it,
But yes.
do it. I'm just gonna be here to egg you on because I do think that is like so important because and I think I do the same thing with like Teens Uncharted where it's like I'm really forcing and pushing like the niche parts of it where like I know nobody else is talking about this, right? Or like nobody's talking about it in this way. And if you have that
Mhm.
skill and strength, like do it. Like push it out there. I'm just gonna keep egging you on.
Thank you. No, do it because I know there's a lot of information. Like I said, I kind of created it already, but it does have a lot of information. And so I think it would be really valuable for families. And I really feel like families need the support sooner than later. And usually that's with the assessment plan. That's usually their start of the whole process. And if they could get that right the first time, then everything else just is a lot smoother.
Girl, I'm just gonna keep pushing you now.
Okay. Check in on me every once in a while and say, "Where are you with that?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's right. I'll do that."
We're best friends now. Like
Yes.
this is going to be part of it. I mean, so the other part of me, I feel like as a therapist and as like a business person is that I've always said that I think that the pool is big enough for every therapist, right? And there are so
Mhm.
many things that we can offer that we just don't do because there's like fear or we're like, who would buy this? Who needs this, right? But again, I think that creating those things, creating the services, creating the trainings is just going to give people like maybe a true understanding of the things that we don't freaking know, right? Like I'm sitting here being
Yeah.
like, I want to watch your assessment webinar because there's probably lots of things that like I don't even know. Granted, I'm not an educational psychologist, but I'm just like I'm interested, right? Like I want to know what that looks like and what your thoughts and recommendations would be because I think that like having something that's tangible and in like a webinar or like a whatever is going to be so valuable. And I'm just going to keep pushing you because I want that for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So I'm thrilled to have you on today. And thank you so much for dealing with all of my questions. And
No, of course. Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. And
well, Monica, thanks so much for coming on the show today. I will definitely let you go because I have kept you. But if anyone wants to reach out and work with Monica, consultations, etc., want more information, all of it's going to be linked.
thank you so much.